Hey, everybody. I'll make it really short and sweet because we have an awesome speaker today. I think most of you know me. My name is Michelle Cavallo. I was the president of the St. Pete Pinellas Local Business and Professional Women. And right now I am joining as the state of Florida president of BPW. Delighted to be here. I just saw a beautiful CNBC over lunch, did a beautiful, I want to try and find the clip. I'm sure it's not going to be as great as what you're doing today, Tara. But
No.
the important thing is we're talking about it, and that's what I was delighted. Is it was long, it was extensive. They really gave it some time, and I think that's important. And having you here, you're just such a gem of our community, and you've been a friend of BPW for a while now. We're so delighted to have you today, Jerry. Well done on inviting you. You got the perfect guest. So thanks for giving me a second to say hello, Chandra.
Thank you. And I'm going to do a very brief introduction. With my introduction, I'm just going to remind everyone that since President John F. Kennedy signed the Equal Pay Act of 1963, women, especially minority women, continue to suffer the consequences of unequal pay. Professor Newsom is uniquely qualified to speak on the topic from a legal and constitutional standpoint. Professor Newsom is a professor at St. Petersburg College, where she also serves as the founding director of the Center for Civic Learning and Community Engagement. In her early career, she worked as a U.S. senatorial aide or page, then served as a policy director for Michigan's Governor Engler, chief counsel to Lieutenant Governor, is it Posthumous?
Yes, terrible name for politics.
As well as staff member for U.S. Senator Abram and the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on Immigration. Tara has contributed to TEDx with her talk, The Constitution, It's Personal. She is also the recipient of the St. Petersburg College Distinguished Faculty of the Year Award and a graduate of St. Pete College Leadership and the Florida Chancellor's Leadership Program. She is also a regular guest on PBS Florida This Week and serves as a political analyst for WFLA Channel 8, Tampa Bay NBC affiliate, and for NPR, A Florida Matters. So please, everyone, welcome Tara Newsom as our speaker on equal pay.
I am delighted to be here with you, and I'm just so humbled that you would ask me to join you for this hour on this really important day that we actually honor the economic liberty of everyone, including women. And I want to share my screen, and I just want to preface our discussion today that I wanted to have a discussion with you rather than a formal presentation with a PowerPoint. I wanted to be as professional, friends at a table, looking at the march through time on equality, equal pay, and where do we go from here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to start where I always start with every one of my talks, which is at the beginning of the Constitution. Now, please don't stick pins in your eyes thinking we're going to talk about these founding documents, but before we even get to the Constitution, we've got to talk about economic liberty, because many of us talk about equal pay as if economic liberty isn't at the heart of it. And really, that conversation begins before the Constitution, all the way at our Declaration of Independence. I also want to start there because there's an important piece of political dialogue that I think sometimes gets distorted. And that's a distortion of our framers and our Constitution and our founding documents and the founding principles. So I want to arm all of us to walk out of here as constitutionalists, not worried about partisan evaluation, but really be able to have conversations about equality, equal pay for women, and policy that affects women and everyone, starting from a constitutional point of view. So before the Constitution even was ratified, we had, of course, our greatest declaration of war, which was the Declaration of Independence. And the reason I want to start there is because in it, it speaks about equality. Okay, and by the way, I'm going to take everyone and reduce them down, and I won't be able to see your faces. So if you want to interrupt, please, we're friends at the table spending our 12 o'clock hour together. Please go ahead and just jump in. But this is where I always start, and I start with my students, and some of whom are on the call today, which I'm really grateful for. And this is where we begin our discussion about equal pay. The idea that even though the framers who designed this declaration of war didn't necessarily intend that women were at the forefront of their mind, or even men that didn't own property, the beautiful sentiment and the architecture of our sovereign declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, and when we say men, we know it means all people are created equal, endowed by their creator, whomever that is, with unalienable rights, that among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I start there because that's the sentiment, the architecture, the philosophical beginnings of equal pay. And it's carried forward in our Constitution. This next tab is the preamble, the directions to our Constitution to achieve equality. And I have it in purple, and I know that all of you were raised on this and remember it. But in today's vernacular and today's specialty of being Equal Pay Day, I wanted to highlight that our preamble and its very first directive to our Constitution, meaning what the Constitution is supposed to do, it directs us very first to establish justice. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, the very first directive is to establish justice. And inherent in the idea of justice is fairness. Inherent in justice is equality. I wanted to bolster that constitutional origin of equal pay, not only in the Declaration of Independence and the preamble, but also in the 9th and the 14th Amendment. I want you to walk out of here today not only knowing instinctually and gutturally that equal work deserves equal pay, but I want you to be armed with the constitutional knowledge to be able to dialogue it and share with our allies, whether it be other women, whether it be men, whether it be people on the opposite side of the aisle of you politically. And one of those important elements is the 9th Amendment. And I have it up on the screen right now. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And the students that might be joining us today have heard me say this 1,000 times. And what this means, and I need you to really listen, is the numbered out rights in the Constitution, like the freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the freedom to not have an unreasonable search and seizure, all those are enumerated or numbered out. Those numbered out rights shall not be understood to deny or make less valuable, that's what disparage means, the rights retained by the people. And the people include women and all people. And so we hold our hat on equal pay in part on the Declaration of Independence, on the preamble, the 9th Amendment, and lastly, the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment has been in the news a lot because we've had a lot of debate about immigration. But the other part of the 14th Amendment that to me is not the immigration piece, that's of course important to remember and to honor, but it's this last part that I just highlighted, not to deny any person within its jurisdictions the equal protection of the laws. And that, of course, means the protection of having equal work and equal pay. Now, I don't want to just end there. I want to just highlight a very important advocate for equal pay, not just for women, but also for minority women that are often a second discussion of this equal pay. And I want to bring it up to the forefront because when we rise up, all people rise up, not just women, not just women of color, but all people. And the person that understood that at the very beginning of a discussion of equal pay and having civil rights being even afforded to all Americans was Sojourner Truth. And Sojourner Truth, her most formidable speech was a speech that many of you may have remembered from your civics class called Ain't I a Woman? And in it, she looked at not only white women, but the men in the room when they were talking about abolitionism and suffrage as they were making their way towards the Civil War. She was 6 foot tall and she was ignored often in these suffrage movement town halls. And she asked over and over to have the floor to speak. And at extreme oh, how am I going to say it? Like at the spur of the moment, I can't say the word correctly. She gave her Ain't I a Woman speech and she looked at her fellow allies, women in the room, white women, and said, ain't I a woman too to deserve civil rights to be afforded to me, to deserve the equal protection of the laws to be afforded to me? And that Ain't I a Woman speech has stayed with me my entire life because when I think about it, I think about humankind, not just women, not just women of color, but every person that's wanting the law to look at them, to shine the light of justice and to have their inalienable rights afforded to them. So I wanted to honor Sojourner Truth's contributions to the discussion of equal pay. Now, You guys can, of course, look at the history of this on the American Association of University Women's website. I wanted to share with this rather than a PowerPoint, just this timeline, because certainly in 1963, when JFK signed the Equal Pay Act, that was, of course, a formidable policy moment. But that's not really when it began. Of course, suffragists like Sojourner Truth, and then, of course, those that advocated for the passage of the 19th Amendment that happened in 1921, that, of course, they were important. But the very first moment towards equal protection happened in 1918 when the U.S. Department of Labor created the Women in Industry Service to address women's labor issues. And then the U.S. Department of Labor created the Women's Bureau, and the Fair Labor Standards Act was created. And then the very first Women's Equality Bill was introduced in 1945, but not passed. And then by the 1960s, we started to see from the White House federal interest in creating institutions that ensured women were treated equally. Now, in 1963, women were paid 59 cents on the dollar. Today, we're paid around 83 cents on the dollar. So in all those years, we've made progress, but we haven't made the kind of progress that we're looking for. And certainly that is a number, that 82 to 83% is for white women. When we start to differentiate by women of color, whether they be Black, Hispanic, or Native American, that number goes all the way down to Native Americans are making around 60 cents on the dollar for compared to white women. So by the 1960s, we were codifying and institutionalizing federal laws that were trying to protect women. But remember, the 14th Amendment still existed. There was still a call for states and the federal government to treat women and men equally, and it was ignored. And we've seen that 1963 call to action to treat women equally in the workforce was bolstered by the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And then, of course, we had our educational amendments, Family Medical Leave, Fair Pay Act, et cetera. And the Paycheck Fairness Act was introduced, not necessarily passed. But it wasn't until 2007. Now, you see on my screen where I have my little cursors on 2009, the precursor to the Lilly Ledbetter Pay Act. Many of you already know about that, really says, hey, we should not allow pay discrimination. We should not allow employees to be injured by these kind of bringing up notice on whether pay is different. That was really preceded by a 2007 Ledbetter versus Goodyear. It was a case in which a woman brought forward the discrimination that she was being paid less than a man in her workforce. And the court actually decided in favor of the employer, saying that there could be differences in pay, that this was just very discretionary for employees and employers. And this wasn't a place where the courts could step in. And that's what really prompted President Obama to get behind the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act and make that a reality so that women could actually make sure that they were in the workforce being paid equally. Now, after the 2009 Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act was implemented, there was still retaliation. There was still individuals not receiving the fair pay. And by 2014, there was an executive order trying to make the EEOC try to collect data to create the evidence-based discussion on how this was continuing to not be fair to women. And then in 2016, we had, of course, the Pay Equity for All Act, which was introduced, trying to prohibit the use of prior salary history before a job offer, never passed. And of course, by 2019, we have the Paycheck Fairness Act, again, awaiting U.S. Senate action. So we're hanging our entire conversation on not only the Ninth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, but of course, the Equal Pay Act of 1963 that has yet to really fully come to fruition and actually protect those of us in the workforce to make sure that our equal work is getting equal pay. And I have to say anecdotally from that is even though this is the American Association of University Women, that is the same case in university and college settings, regardless of how far our dialogue has been, the wages have not contributed as well. Now, I wanted to take us to the next steps of what we're living through now. And by the way, anybody that wants to interrupt me, please, 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 we're friends at the table. Would love to pause. I often talk too fast. So if anybody wants to interrupt, please do. Where are we today, though? Well, in January, we are facing some of the biggest obstacles to equality in the workforce. And that is because we have a executive order that is looking and dialoguing and narrating a much different story about what women, people of color, LGBTQ plus, disabled, all sorts of individuals in our country who face pay differentials face. And the reason I bring this up is because on its face, I think we all want equality and merit-based opportunities. But the spirit of the executive order is questionable because it seeks to diminish the value of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and diminish the value of the Equal Pay Act of 1963's legislative intent. And I want to zone in on that. Legislative intent is very important. We look to our legislatures to pass laws on the federal level, of course, and on the state level. And what their intent of that law is just as important as what goes into effect. Sometimes the effect of laws are different than what was intended. And that's why courts often go to legislative intent. Well, this is an executive order that's trying to reevaluate opportunities for Americans to live out equality in the workplace. And the executive intent is clearly different than the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, and is clearly different than the Equal Pay Act. And so please make time to review these executive orders, because sometimes the title might resonate with you if you believe in equality, but the executive intent doesn't reconcile with the titles. So this is at our doorstep when we're trying to seek out equal pay. We're also facing, of course, the National Women's Law Center has dialogued a lot about Project 2025. National Women's Law Center is a nonpartisan organization that seeks not just for justice for women, but justice for all. And they talk about the intent of this project. And many of you are familiar with Project 25. You know that Project 2025 is a white paper that comes out of the Heritage Foundation, and that is really trying to detail out what policy initiatives that this White House wants to carry forward. And it's controversial, not because it's partisan. It's controversial because it goes against much of the legislation that many of us have grown up professionally with. And so I just want to take it down. And I apologize if you feel this is inflammatory, but the Heritage Foundation has, the report has a lot of attacks on what would be considered women's rights, protections against sex discrimination, other forms of discrimination, attacks on reproductive rights and access to healthcare, attacks on education, workplace justice, LGBTQ plus. Those, whether or not you're pro or con those pieces in public space, our Constitution seeks to have equality for all, and equal pay is touched by these ideas, because equal pay in the workforce is not a siloed event. It gets impacted by other legislation that's being pushed forward as well. And so if we normalize discriminating either based on religion, on sexuality, if we normalize having pay differentials and taxation differentials for different incomes, it creates caste systems, and those caste systems impact equal pay. So I just wanted to make that something that we maybe open up our discussions about later after we're finished. Certainly, there's lots of people are participating in blackout days, economic blackout days. Those come from our constitutional history. Economic blackout days are part of our rich framers' history of having economic boycotts when the 13 colonies, which had lived under a quasi-independent economic condition, were saddled with something called the Stamp Act or the Sugar Act, which tried to all of a sudden put these very difficult levies on the colonists. And they said, no, we're going to use an economic boycott to push back. Women are using today as an economic blackout day to show their economic strength. You know that women are a huge force of consumerism and are actually inheriting about $81 trillion worth of income with the baby boomers and their transfer of wealth. And so women are an economic powerhouse. Their economic liberty should be respected. And today, of course, is a day where people are exercising that. Sometimes we want to talk about what else can we do besides an economic boycott. And there are lots of pro-women organizations to run for office. I want to draw your attention to the National Council of State Legislatures. They often celebrate women, both Republican and Democratic women, in legislative office. And I would say one of the best things that we could do besides get educated and vote is decide to run for office and to lend your voice to the legislative process, whether it be on a local level, a state level, or a federal level, because that is a place where we can start to make real change and to make sure that legislation doesn't just speak to one brand of our citizenship, but to all brands of our citizenships. I wanted to also raise the idea that this isn't just a United States problem. Oftentimes we get mired up in our own backyards, but this is a global problem. And the United Nations has put out an enormous amount of data about how women's economic justice and rights are key to achieving, United Nations goals and to make sure that economies grow. Everybody on this call knows that we're part of a global economy. What happens in the United States trickles out into other countries, and what happens in other countries trickles back in. So making sure that women are economically treated fairly and justly not only affects our own backyard, but it affects our global economy and will close the global inequalities across the country. And I also wanted to raise this last piece. We're talking about Equal Pay Day today. And of course, on this call, we want to pay special attention to women. But the truth is that equality for everyone is really at the spirit of today. That when there is equal pay for women, when there is equal pay for Black women, Hispanic women, LGBTQ plus women, Native American women, disabled women, there is equality also for our brothers and sisters in other areas. And there is often a narrative that when individuals who are minorities, and women are a minority group in politics, advocate that they're somehow saying the rest of the table, the rest of the people aren't invited to the table. And that is just simply not true. Equal Pay Day, at the heart of it, is wanting laws and the economic engine that runs our country and our families to be honored. And the other piece that we have to talk about is that there is a complete void in talking about the economic contributions that women, who are still the majority caregivers in our country, give, not only as a sandwich generation, caring for older Americans and their own families and their children, but caring for their neighbors, their church communities. That kind of contribution has an economic figure to it. It's in the trillions every year. And so we're not just talking about your salary at work. We're also talking about the economic contributions you make because of the nurturing and caregiving that women give to their families and to their communities. And so you must start paying attention to that, because those contributions are not collateralized, they're not realized, they're not discussed. And as we start shifting into the retirement of our baby boomer generation, and we start to have to, as families, absorb that care and the cost of that care, that conversation is going to have to be raised up to the top and be hand in hand with salary conversations, because those are real contributions that women are making to our communities and to our economies. That is what I wanted to talk about today. And I wanted to spend the rest of our time opening it up as a family of people to talk about how important this stuff is. And so I welcome any questions or discussions or thoughts on this.
Jerry, I see your hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
Yep, I was going to say I will. I'll get us started with some questions. How's that, Tara?
That'd be great.
So Tara, this year we're marking the first time ever that Equal Pay Day has gone backwards in the calendar. So up until the pandemic, we were closer to April or even potentially in April. During the pandemic, we moved into early March. Do you think that this is a sign that more of the service personnel, women who were working in service industries, are coming back into the workforce now that the pandemic is quote unquote over? And is it something we should look for continuing to come backwards?
And thanks so much for the question, Jerry. I actually think that was by 2022 we were starting to go backwards. So I think this could have happened in another year where we're actually going backwards in time instead of making salary increases. I think you bring up a great point that COVID shifted us into these service-based economies, right? Certainly here in Florida, we experienced that. Service-based economies are difficult to shore up. We still have real difficulties making fair minimum wage laws. We also haven't necessarily even the playing field for our childcare responsibilities. A third of our families are built by single mothers. I'm a single mother. It's very difficult to be able to shore up your salary when you're also dealing with the kind of jobs that you need to get because of childcare responsibilities. So that's a reality that I don't know how to, put into the analysis. But I want to add something else that I think is not only the service-based piece or the childcare piece, or even those of us that have cared for our parents. I, of course, cared for both of my parents in hospice, both of them, which took me away from my job. I had to have a job that was able to manage those kind of needs outside of my workplace as well, which interrupted my ascent to a higher position in the college, of course, affecting my ability to earn more money. But the other piece besides that reality that I want to talk about is difficult for us to talk about, which is the changing narrative in our society. And there has been a shift in the last few years that the reality that more women are graduating from college, that more women are actually becoming breadwinners, has been a front to some people in our society. And I think that that is manifesting itself in some cultural talk and some policy talk. And I think we need to be mindful of that sometimes, and I make it a really big point that when we rise, we bring everyone with us and we don't ignore that. That's a responsibility that we have as women and as human beings, I believe. But I think that not everyone sees it that way, and that the rise of women achieving in education and in the economy can be a front to some people, and that there is a policy dialogue that might be interfering with women's advancement with their salaries. And we need to be honest about it, because if we're honest about it, we can say, well, why is that happening? What's the misinformation? And it could be that women are seen as a competition and an affront, and that's scary to people. And anecdotally, many of us can say, hey, man, most of us that are women, we know we can do our job, run our household, drop off the casserole at church, do a million other things at one time, and still exceed the expectations at work. That can be scary to a society that hasn't necessarily prepared everyone in the economy the same way that women are prepared. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Does anybody else have some thoughts about that? Maybe some explanations that I'm not considering? I really believe in pluralism. I grow on these talks. I'm so grateful to have this time with you. So I would love to hear from the participants, and nobody should be shy. Nobody has all the answers. I certainly don't, but I'd like to hear about everybody on the call, what you think might be the reason why. And the reason why I want to know that is I have a unique position at the college in which I work with students, and I'm so grateful to work with students. And they're looking to us as professional mentors and as leaders, wherever we're at. That's what they need from us. And I want to know how I can make it better for them. How can I reduce the obstacles so they can self-actualize and be the most that they can be? And you might know something or see an obstacle. So please, the floor is open.
I'm gonna say something I'm really thinking about. So just for reference, I work for Duke Energy, a very male dominated for a long time. It's getting better. We have Lynn Good, who's about to retire, Melissa Satius, but for a very long time, the energy sector in general was certainly a male dominated industry. I've been there 35 years, so you can imagine what I've seen in 35 years. And one thing they said on CNBC this morning that caught my attention is companies, and I think Duke Energy is like this, are getting a little bit better. Like if I go to my HR department, they would say to you, our accountant ones, whether you're male or female, I mean, we work hard to make sure, and they do, and they probably do, right? but that some companies have started analyzing that they promote men more frequently. And the reason is because men ask for it and women don't. I don't know if that's leaning towards, I know where you're going with your conversation, but it just caught me funny. Like, golly, I do think that's part of it. I do think I think I've suffered from, like, I'm just thankful to have this job. I'm so thankful for, I say that all the time. I'm loyal. I love my job. I'm paid fairly. Like, I'm not going to say anything, man. I got a good gig. Where's that coming from though? Like, I should,
Bravo, bravo, Michelle, for actually being vulnerable enough to say what I think is on a lot of our minds. And especially if you're 50 over, you were socialized, and we can't ignore, we talk about political socialization and how we vote and why we vote. Okay. We talk about that in my class a lot, but how we engage as women in the workforce professionally is huge. And I think that a lot of it has to do with that we are often told, as especially if we have families, well, you're lucky that you have a job where you can balance your family. You're lucky that, and so those yes, cultural socialization. Thank you, Dr. Moore. And Dr. Moore is a colleague of mine at SBC. Thank you for joining us. She's the head of our health and service program. Thank you for joining us today. But that socialization, that no matter how smart you are, you have cognitive dissonance, right? And you have to say, hey, I want that. And it's interesting that you say this, because in my own home, I have to coach my kids to say, ask for it. The answer is no if you don't ask for it. But we as a generation of women have a difficult time. And we also aren't, I'm going to say something that you may or may not agree, but we're not always nice to other women who do ask for it and get it. We need to be nicer to each other, because sometimes I see colleagues who ask for it and they go for it. And I think, wow, they did it. But not everybody's encouraging of that in a workplace and professional socialization, and sometimes they detract from it. I also see women who make a choice to work professionally and they don't develop their personal life as much in I'm using air quotes, traditional way necessarily. And then there's a lot of judgment for them professionally and personally that they didn't make that family that traditional way. And so I'm just saying, as stewards of changing the paradigm for for the next few generations, we need to be supportive of everyone having equality in the workforce, but also having equality in our communities. Because if you think that in the workforce, this happens in a silo, this is happening in the community, and it just looks different. So who else has something to add?
I have a question.
Okay, hi,
Now,
Michelle.
in a circumstance of my own personal, my daughter or my sister, she has gone to school. She's gone back to school 3 times now. She's got her master's degree, and she is still working at the same job she has been working at for 20 years and is making a third of what she could be making, and it's I've tried to encourage her. I have tried to do everything that I can to help her on her journey, getting herself advanced in her work field. And she just doesn't seem to have the ambition to do so. And it's not because of family. Her daughter is grown and married now, and it's just her and her husband. So it's not like she has young children that are holding her back, but how do you get someone in that situation to move forward? How do you get them to do that?
Sheila Barry Oliver, I saw your hand up. Did you want to speak to that, or did you want to speak to something else?
Something else.
Okay. So Michelle, I can't speak as a psychologist. I'm just the daughter of one, but I can say that in society, I think your sister's worldview, it's either personal, which is not much we can all do except encourage her. But if it's societal, it's the idea that those reducing the barriers for success. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And it sounds like that could be something that she needs to face. But sometimes we need to redefine success. So let me just say that sometimes our idea of success is monetary or something else. She might feel a lot of success where she's at. And as like a woman to a woman or a sister to a sister, sometimes we just need to say, I may not understand that, but I honor that success mode. I have been said to, people have said to me all the time, including my own kids, because I had a much more lucrative career when I was younger. Why aren't you making more money, Mom? Like, why are you in this open enrollment college? Why aren't you doing more stuff? And I say, because A, my faith compels me to be where I'm at, and B, my professional world allows me to take care of all the people in my life that I want to take care of, including them. But they didn't understand that model of success. So maybe change, or maybe just try to step out and see if she's actually defined her own success, and then be supportive of that. Sheila Bear Oliver and then Sarah Brewer. Or Sarah, did you want to speak to Michelle real fast?
I did. You know, I worked for the court. I'm a psychotherapist, and I was a psychotherapist for the court, which was like swimming in the old white guy testosterone all the time. And, and I really loved work and the clients, but I was so terribly underpaid. And it took about 14, 16 years before I stopped saying, I can't do this on my own. They finally pissed me off enough that it took me getting really angry that I figured out I could launch and start my own practice, which has been really successful. And so one of the ways that I was able to fight it was I simply left that argument and went into my field that I could make more money and have more success. And then the other thing I wanted to speak to is, the concept of sisterhood. In my work, I have a number of psychiatric nurse practitioners. We have community mental health, and they're all working for this community mental health, and it beats the hell out of them and underpays them. And they all ended up in therapy. And so I've been able to talk to these women about, you can do this privately. I can fill your caseload. You're going to be able to do it. And don't you know, I have one who just did it and is not in therapy anymore. I just talked to her to hear about how she's opened her own practice and referred people to her, and the next one's on her way. So, it didn't feel like I was making this big move at the time when I left. I mean, it felt like a big move for me, but I just wanted to speak to both of those things. Is one is trusting the timing of it, and the other is, trusting that those little things we're building from each other.
A good point. Sheila Berry Oliver, you were so patient.
I'm patient. That's fine. I was late joining, so I don't know if you touched on this topic earlier before I joined. I'm curious about your views on the impact of the rollback of DEI initiatives in organizations. I led a corporate DEI initiative 20 years ago, and our goal was to provide greater equality in terms of career advancement, but also in terms of how employees were evaluated, because in fact the evaluations measures were very male stereotypical. So I'm curious about your views on, one, what is the potential impact of the rollback of organizational DEI initiatives, and how do we collectively impact that?
Well, we spoke a little bit about the executive order that pulls out DEI. And of course, here in Florida, Sheila, you are living through very open hostility towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it be in institutions like mine, educational institutions, or any place else. I mean, in Florida, our governor has said, woke came to Florida to die, and woke is attached to DEI. Most of us understand DEI to be what you presented, which is a place for honoring the diversity, equity, and inclusion of people that aren't always included in the workforce, right? And to make sure that everyone is honored in their pay, and to be included in opportunities that they have maybe had historical disadvantages in applying. Your question, I think, is to the heart of like, what will the impact be? I have to just be totally honest, extremely chilling on women and people of color and disabled people in actually flexing some of the unique aspects of who we are. We bring to the table not just our human personhood, but unique things. As a woman, I bring a different set of skills to the table than a man. I think we're not going to be able to fully realize all those pieces in the workforce. I think there's going to be a chilling effect for women and minorities to be moved up because the fear is that if their employer promotes them, that they could be promoting because of DEI instead of merit-based. I think it's going to take us back to where women are going to have to work that much harder, that much more to show that we are deserving of those promotions and those pay increases. I mean, you know the answer, right? You know the answer. You knew the answer before you asked it because we're living.
Except that the second part of my question was, what can we do?
Well, that part, let me get to that part. And I would say that most of us have to do the first thing, which is, and I have to be honest, I'm guilty of this. I get scared. So I get scared of retribution in my employment, and I get scared of retribution in my community when I do a lot of talks, okay? And I go on TV a lot. And I get nervous that when I talk truth and I talk about the Constitution, that truth is no longer being honored. So the first step to your second part of your question is I need to work through that fear. It's okay to be afraid, right? But I got to be brave. Bravery, of course, is facing it. And that means to keep on doing this and having these conversations. The second piece is collective action. It's the same way that we got the Equal Pay Act in 1963. It's the same way we got suffrage in the 19th Amendment. It's the same way that we make any good change. It's collective action. And the part that's really hard about that is collective action means that we have to get out of our silos and get into organizations like this. But everybody on this call knows that. That's why you're part of this organization, right? You're unsiloing yourself by coming together. But then you have to take that into other areas. And that collective action means, to possibly start working your neighborhood, understanding who's in your cohort at church, those kind of pieces, using your social media to not be divisive, but to be inclusive. I think there's a lot of opportunity to put your hand across the bridge to people that may have supported the anti-DEI, but didn't truly understand what the consequences would be. Right now, the political dialogue doesn't heavy on civic dignity. So I would say wrap yourself up in civic dignity. I'd love to add that, and I'll add it while someone else speaks. There's a lot of material on the internet right now talking about how we dialogue about it. And you can tell that I'm very careful about how I dialogue about it, not just because I don't want to be inflammatory, but because I want to have a civil place to talk. But what do you do about it? You talk to others, collective action, you vote, and then you run for office, Sheila. I mean, that's the truth. And that's always been the truth. And it's not until women are in, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, every room that a decision is made, that we will have decisions made not only for us, but for every one of us that we represent. And there's a million quotes I could show you about you educate a woman, you educate a nation. We could keep going, right? And so women need to be in places where decisions are made, because even if we don't share the same political background, we share the same kind of perspective of how to be inclusive and take everyone that can add value to our work, our community, our institutions, and move them forward. That means you have to run for office, Sheila, and I will put up lawn signs for you.
Yeah, she's already got some support in the chat box.
Hani, am I saying it right, Hani?
Hanny, yes.
Hanny. Hi, Hanny. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice
I
to
like
meet
your
you.
sweatshirt. It's okay.
You like those Cougars, huh?
I do.
Yeah, a lot of women actually ask me for it, but that's my alma mater. Thank you very much, Tara, for giving us your time and the benefit of your experience and vision. This was very enlightening for me, as has been my membership with the BPW, actually over a couple of years now. Uh, I was in the corporate world. I understand the battle that you are going through constantly from a legislative perspective since 1963. The laws still have not been solidified properly, and here we are dealing with new laws and DEI initiatives blocking. It's just a lot to deal with. And there were some great comments made. One of the things that I truly support really is empowering women personally, psychologically, if you will. I spoke on a couple of occasions on imposter syndrome. And
Yes.
my God, the reaction I got mostly from women in the room. that yes, you touched on some subjects, and most importantly, really was support and encouragement, that you have what it takes. You shouldn't hold back. And more of that, I think, would be great. Holding sessions to draw women to acknowledgement, and realization that sometimes they are their own worst enemies in terms of advancement. Uh, and get them to speak up and step up. I've worked with women. I know the pros and cons. One of the things that I love about women, a common trait, is that the loyalty established is much stronger than any man could offer, unless you're in the military. But and for that reason, maybe that's probably what holds women back from advancement. It's that loyalty itself, that you don't want to disturb the status quo and your relationship with your supervisors or seniors. But a lot of work has to be done on the women's psyche, for the lack of the better word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Uh,
true.
as in men's group, some of the things that I picked up on in terms of planning for the future of companies is that their perception of who's going to last. And for some reason, it's naturally assumed. I come from an international background, and I have seen that the same mentality shifts from country to country, culture to culture, and that is that will women be that career individual, that will stay with the company, loyal forever, and yet not take different roads, get married, have children, decide on different types of careers. This, I know, is a seed that is in a lot of men's mentalities, and something that also has to be, I guess, addressed. How, where, what the platform is, I honestly don't know.
I
But
think you touched upon something that's really interesting, the imposter syndrome. And I'd be curious if anyone else would be willing to acknowledge this. I suffer from it all the time. So I often think, and I have a postdoctorate, and I still think, oh, they know more than I. They know they're going to know more than me. And they might. But once you get past that and think, okay, they will, it's okay, but I'm going to give them the best I got, then you get somewhere. But you have to be older and go through stuff like that. But the piece that I want to speak to, besides the imposter syndrome, is this idea that there is architecture in our institutions and our employment that socialize women to not ask for more. And I'll just say, without saying names, that in my life, being a single mother, it has been shared with me. I have had said to me when I said, I want to make more money, have more responsibility, I'm working more at the college, and it has been said to me, hey, there's lots of people in your spot that'd be happy to have your job. As if I was lucky, that same feeling, like I'm lucky to have it, like what Michelle had said. Well, I am lucky to have it, but I also work very hard and I'm an asset. So the conversation from a man and the institution should have nothing to do with my family or being a single mother. It should have had everything to do with what I can contribute to the mission of the institution. And that is a difficult thing, because we can try to socialize and support one another, but how do we attack that kind of middle management piece that is affecting a ceiling for women? And that's real. The other thing is, what do you do when you are raising young men who are being signaled from the highest point of our society that sexual assault or treating women based on the way they look or violence against women should not have the full force of the law pushed against them? So if you think that equal pay isn't affected by that, we're wrong, because it's all in the socialization of how we go forward in the workplace. So those social issues that maybe aren't appropriate for us to necessarily dive into in this discussion today, they impact equal pay. Because why would you pay a woman equal if you think she's less than? If the full weight of the law shouldn't be applied if she's hurt. So I see Dr. Moore, my colleague's hand is up. Dr. Moore?
Yeah, I raised, can you hear me, Tara?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I raised my hand and I put it in the chat so I wouldn't forget. When your hair gets to be this gray, it takes you a minute to remember
I'm
what
so
was it I
happy to
was
hear
gonna
your
say.
voice.
So
You're
I
no
have to
longer my
put,
colleague. You're off to other better things, but
yeah, I'm always gonna be your colleague because
oh,
I'm your
good.
sister. So you
Happy
don't
to
get
see
rid
you.
of me. It's just that simple. But I have to keep notes so I can remember what it was I was gonna say. You were talking about asking for more, and imposter syndrome is part of why we don't ask for more. My favorite mantra has become, you can never pay me what I'm worth, but you can always compensate me for what I do. If I look at the fact that when you say we work hard and we work the hardest and that we are the most loyal and that we feel like this is where we should be and that we should sacrifice and give up what's necessary to be here. So you can't pay me what I'm worth, but you have to definitively compensate me for the things that I do. And if we recognize the things that we do and don't feel like we're undeserving, I don't think anyone, um, even with the imposter syndrome, doesn't realize exactly what it is. And that's very foreign for me because I had a mother who's was very intentional and purposeful. You talk about raising sons and raising daughters. Um, and daily she told me, you are brilliant, you are intelligent, you are beautiful, you are, regardless of what the world tells you, what their standards are, I'm telling you who you are. And I was dumb enough to believe her. So I literally governed my entire life according to whatever it was that she told me. You are brilliant, you're intelligent, you can do whatever anybody else can do, you can do anything. And so I didn't even realize that there was such thing as gender bias until I started my graduate studies well into my age because um, I, I I had never been told that I couldn't be an engineer because I was female or African American, or I couldn't be a mathematician. I had only been told, you are a mathematician, you are an engineer, and you're the best engineer, you're the best mathematician. So very intentional and purposeful about the language that she used with me. And so, because I have no biological children, as you know, because I didn't get married, I'm a newlywed with all this here. So, by the time I got married, it was too late for me to make babies. But I have a lot of children of the heart that are not from my womb. And I try to reproduce my mother in the earth in the way that I mentor them. To create everything that she's given me that's made me strong and made me better in who I am. I try to pass that along. And it's not just to my daughters that I'm mentoring, but it has to be in that sisterhood as well, because the whole concept of imposter syndrome, when I heard what it was, I was like, what are you talking about? It was just so rare for me. And so we have to be very intentional, and educating truthfully is so important. There's so much misinformation. And so I put all these little notes in the chat because there's just too much for me to say, and I'll stop talking now. But I appreciate this platform. I appreciate these like-minded people gathering together for this type of dialogue and discourse. It's so important. And when I said fear of success, I didn't mean fear, but some people are, like you said, the definition of success. This is enough for me. This is where I want to be. This is how I see it. I'm able to do these other things because I have stayed here for the past 15, 20 years, regardless of how many credentials I've earned along the way. And becoming aware of that is part of the education of the truth, what her truth is.
That's extremely very helpful, Joy. I'm so happy to see you. Can I erase something? We only have a few minutes left, but I want to take what Joy said and what Sheila said and put them together. Joy mentioned about how we talk to our sons and daughters, and I had mentioned that as well. When I'm looking at social media and how the political socialization is happening to our daughters, it's also happening to our young men. So when we dialogue about how we talk, like what Joy had said about her mother encouraging her and being mindful, I think we need to do that for our sons and our daughters, but also our male colleagues. You know, Hani, I'm very grateful that you're here. I recognize that you're a man, you're an ally, right? And I'm an ally of yours because we're human beings, but we're also human beings that I think have a shared mind. Sometimes we forget that we need to be we need to grow allies and be allies, right? So we're not just allies of women, but we're allies of everyone seeking equality. And what I'm seeing on social media right now is the pushback against women is in part because men are feeling like they're not getting their fair share. Okay, do you see I'm using my little air quotes? I'm not saying I believe that. I'm not saying you believe that. I'm saying I'm seeing that on social media. To hold a hand out to others to say, I want equality for me and I want equality for you, I think is a much greater way to move forward for any one of us. But to the second piece that Sheila mentioned about what can we do, which is in those last few moments together, which I really want to talk about, is be that mindful mentor that Joy said, to not just those around you, men and women, but to yourself, right? To your family members. But then we need to coach ourselves. And I'm saying this to myself as much as I'm saying it to you, to do more. Sheila asked, what can we do? And I, of course, glibly say, run for office, Sheila, because that's what I want everybody to do. But the truth of the matter is that I can do other things besides vote professionally, try to get people involved, try to grow my faith walk community, to be active in my community, to grow my professional cohort, to be active in the community. I can do a lot more things on a day-to-day basis. They're going to look different for each one of us. And one of the hallmarks of St. Pete College is find your brand of citizenship, find your brand of advocacy for equality. But the first place you got to start is with the Constitution. Do not make this partisan, and do not just make it about women, because when women rise up, all rise up. It's not just us, it's everyone that is not being treated equally. We don't want more, we just want equal. And when you start dialoguing like that, we can make real steps forward, because the movement to push back against women and to push back against DEI and to push back against equal pay is that there's a real movement that says that, hey, asking for equal is more. And that's just not true. And we have to be the ambassadors of that conversation, ambassadors of the constitutional protections with the 9th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, and keep on lifting each other up. I'm so grateful to have this time with you. I know we're running on about 1 minute, and I hope I'm going to get off and join this federation, because it's the second time I've been with you guys, and I'm always just inspired by you. Thank you for having me. I hope you invite me back. I hope it's in real time, and I'm going to try to get there tonight if my nose isn't running so bad and I don't get anybody sick. I think it might be a allergy, but I don't know. Is there any last minute questions from anybody?
Well, I'm just going to make a last minute statement. First off, we love you as well, Tara. And so you are welcome amongst us, whether you join us or not. You're always welcome to join us at any of our lunches or any of our events. We look forward to seeing you. Don't worry about your runny nose. We will love you no matter what. We really appreciate you taking your time out, especially knowing that you had a class today to talk about this really important conversation and to help us move forward with it. I think you're absolutely right that there are many coalitions and many things that we can do individually as well as a group to move forward in, and hopefully we will. And I agree with you totally that DEI is going to be someplace that we're probably going to have to really start looking and concentrating on, especially as the current administration is removing so many references to Native Americans, women, other people of color throughout the history and the accomplishments that they have made for this country. So I think it's going to be important for all of us to stand up and make sure that those things are not forgotten. So thank you again so much for coming and speaking with us. We look forward to seeing you. And anytime you have a minute and you want to talk to any of us, whether it be a local organization, the statewide, or other locals, I'm sure we will find a way to make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll see you guys tonight. All right. Bye.
Absolutely.
Thank you.